for me, I found, I think step one is understanding that being a successful entrepreneur is not just a job, at least for the successful ones I know. It is a way of life.
When you write a book about business courage, you run into a slew of statistics that tell you why you shouldn't go be an entrepreneur. Like some of them that I remember are like 9,000 brands are going to rattle on and off the Fortune 500 in the next 6 decades. Or the old famous 52% of the Fortune 500 since 2000 are gone, and that number is going to hold. And usually the next question I get is like, what about mergers and takeovers or mergers and acquisitions? I bumbled it, but really it's a takeover more than a merger. And look, I guess all of this is code for it's hard to be an entrepreneur. It's just not an easy choice. And today we're joined by Aron Ezra, who is let's call it what it is. I mean, you're in the third company,
Right. Yep.
As an entrepreneur.
Yep.
And like, is it a sickness that you like wanting to build and develop? Does your poor family go, what are you doing? Like, just maybe take it from the top. Like, how did this happen for you? And articulate, maybe if you can, just a little bit of the backstory, how you got here.
Sure. Yeah. So, I had been working in a lot of different jobs in my 20s. I was a writer. I was a consultant. I was a crisis manager. I was a salesperson. I was in advertising. I just did so many different things. And, what was interesting is that each job that I took, and I've left out several, a recruiter as well, all sorts of others, each job that I took, I always felt like it wasn't quite right. There were things that I was really, really interested in, and there were things that I really loved about each of those positions. But for me, and I didn't realize this when I was younger, but for me, it was really difficult for me to constantly be working in an environment where I couldn't create any roles. I had to follow the established way of doing everything. And, that's just not the way that I liked to work. I remember I was in a meeting when I was like 21 years old at this big agency that I was working at. And they had like the client in and everybody was presenting. And I just jumped in and I was like, hey, I have some ideas as well. And I talked and I thought like I had done a great job. And, the client was like, oh, that's cool. Yeah, those are some neat thoughts. And then afterwards, they're like, if you do anything like that again, you're fired. That's your last day. So I quit the next week. That was the start. But, I think in the entrepreneurial world, I sort of hit this point in my life in working for all these other companies where I was like, boy, I am super unhappy. Like, this sucks. Maybe I'm just not cut out for like the actual work world. And I went to a Borders bookstore, now out of business, and was just looking through all of the different shelves at like, who's happy in life? What are the careers to go for? And I remember picking up this one book, and it was like profiles of all these inspirational folks. And I noticed that so many of those people were entrepreneurs. And, I never knew any entrepreneurs growing up. It was never on my radar as a thing that existed. And it just sort of was this slow dawning on me that, oh, wait, maybe I could just do my own thing. And whether it's you call it a sickness or an addiction or whatever, the highs are much, much, much higher. The lows are much, much, much lower. And it's just a much more exciting way to live life, at least for me. And so that's what's kept me going.
So, I mean, today I should have done this the right way, right? Like today you're the chairman of Plan A Technologies, but former CEO of 2 software companies, both have been acquired. That's a pretty good batting average, if you ask me. You also call yourself a futurist. You see yourself as an inventor. Um, but I love, like you said, like you were just curious in a room at one point and you're like, I got some ideas.
Sure.
And then the fear sort of seeped in, right? And like that's one of the things that I learned that I'm just fascinated by. I always say, I don't know how we're wired. I went to television radio school, so I went out and talked to like clinical psychologists and the CEO of Neurogym on like what's actually going on in our mind. And I think we think we've advanced as a people, but we really have not. We're kind of, technology has advanced. We have not advanced. It's
Sure. Yeah.
these little stains that are on our brain are real. And ironically, I think one of your first jobs was kind of like, it was in the crisis comms space. It was actually to maybe, hey, okay, how do we respond to this? And, look, this is a show about being courageous. I always felt that not that you couldn't be courageous in crisis comms, but it was almost the exact opposite muscle.
It's
right?
true. Yeah. Yeah.
The
goal is to de-risk the situation and to calm everything down. So you don't want to take those risks at all.
I mean, and do you find it ironic now, like when you look back at your, like this run that you've had, that it started there, like, hitting the brakes versus hitting the gas?
Yeah, well, it's funny. I sometimes think, I remember when I was thinking about going to graduate schools and looking at like business schools and law schools and, drama schools and all sorts of different graduate programs. I remember thinking like, okay, well, I could learn how to, kind of do business the conventional way. And then, I took this very different path where in working in crisis situations, you constantly get to see businesses that have totally screwed up. So, there's an explosion on the manufacturing floor, or the CEO just slept with an intern, the medication that they have just put out and millions of people are taking is actually making people sick instead of getting them better. All sorts of like horrible, terrible things. And, some of those are certainly unexpected, like, oh my God, nobody could have predicted this. But so many of those situations again and again were predictable, awful things that somebody should have seen. And I found that like, instead of getting an MBA in the conventional way, getting a chance to see how so many different businesses kept doing it wrong and kept messing up was itself really, really fantastic experience. And, it's funny, I didn't see it at the time, but so many of those different random crazy jobs that I had, again, in sales and recruiting and marketing and everything else, actually gave me a really well-rounded background for being an entrepreneur, because I learned, how to do one job and then how to do the next job and how to do the next job. And while at the time that I was going through all of those things, I kept thinking like, oh my gosh, what am I doing? What am I doing? Now looking back, I'm so grateful that I get a chance to do that, because I can sit down in a room with our recruiting team or our marketing team or our engineering team. And, I've done so many of these different kinds of things that I can at least credibly think about and talk to them about, the work that they're doing. So you never know where life is going to lead you with that stuff.
Yeah, I completely agree that, because, where we're the same is I came from agency, and the amount of verticals that I got to play in, and, originality sometimes was like, wow, why doesn't this vertical accept this idea?
Yeah.
In that vertical, they do this all the time. And I think the answer is, they just don't know, because they keep hiring people from the vertical who've only been in the vertical for 20 years.
That's right.
They're all playing off the same playbook. Now, okay, let's say crisis comms is the school of reactionary and de-risking. Being an entrepreneur is a proactive arena. It's hitting the gas, doing it in a way that's calculated, of course. But like, okay, let's say as an expert in entrepreneur behavior, which you are, and I'm listening to this conversation, and I want to start. I want to be an entrepreneur. Like, how do I even begin? Where do I even go? What's your advice?
I think That's a great question, and there are entire books written about that. Of course, for me, I found, I think step one is understanding that being a successful entrepreneur is not just a job. At least for the successful ones I know, it is a way of life, and it is walking down a very, very different path that is not just not a 9 to 5. It's not an 8 to 6. It's like a 20-hour a day adventure, where you're thinking about it on the weekends. You're thinking about it when you're watching a movie. You're thinking about it when you're taking a walk and hanging out with your friends and everything else. Like, it is just this ever-present thing. And even if you were to somehow magically have the ability to work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and never take a break, you would still only be doing a tiny, tiny, tiny fraction of what you could be doing or feel like you should be doing, because there are always more prospective clients to reach out to, more potential wonderful people to be bringing onto the team and hiring, more potential marketing things you should be doing, things you should be doing to get your technology roadmap in better shape, and the list goes on and on. And so I think step one is thinking, like, is that what I want to do? Does that sound fun to me? Or does that sound horrible to me? I think there are a lot of folks who kind of get into the world of being an entrepreneur because they'll think, gosh, you know what? I don't like having a boss. That sucks. I don't want to work too much. I don't want to work all these days. I want to be able to choose my own hours. Don't go into it if that's your main goal. At least if you want to have like a business that really scales, as opposed to like kind of a small part-time lifestyle business, because it is going to be much, much more work and much, much more draining and all-encompassing being an entrepreneur than working for somebody else in general, or at least for a big company. And so, I would say that's one of the very first things to think about. But then on top of that, once you kind of think like, all right, that sounds like an adventure I want to go on. That sounds kind of cool. Now you really need to think about, where is your passion, or at least what's something that you think you can do really, really, really well, and that you would be excited to keep doing for at least 5 years. Because in general, like, businesses are going to take roughly at least that long to scale up, get sold, have an earn out, et cetera. If that's your goal, certainly many people run their business for a lot longer than that. But, it's the kind of thing that you don't want to get sick of. You need to be happy with it. And then once you have your idea, and that is an amazing journey as well, when you're trying to think about what to do and trying to figure out, all right, somebody else is doing it. Is it okay if I do something similar? Is mine different enough? Am I going to get sued? Are they going to sue me? Figuring out all of that stuff is we could talk about that for 5 hours. But coming up with that idea is super, super important. Some of the businesses I've done and have invested in and advised have picked great ideas in the beginning, and that made their development cycle so much easier. Others have been successful, but maybe they didn't pick the best idea in the beginning, and it was really, really, really much, much, much harder for them. So picking that idea is going to be really important, and making sure that when you kind of pitch your friends and talk to your friends about it, and family, that there's at least some kind of recognition from people that they get it. You don't need to have everybody get it. That's okay. But I think a lot of people kind of go into things and they're constantly like, look, I know what I'm doing. Nobody else has to get it. I'll build a market. I'll figure this out. And that just makes it so much harder, especially for your first business. And then I would say also, like, really think a lot about things like, do I want a partner? In general, it's better to have at least one partner, especially if it's somebody who you really, really trust. You have to make sure you pick the right partner, somebody who, you're okay talking to every single day, multiple times a day, that you're not going to fight with. I always found that it's great to get a partner who has a different skill set than I do, so that that I kind of am in charge of the things I'm in charge of. My partner's in charge of the things that he's in charge of. And, it just works out where there's not as much kind of headbutting. There's so much in here. Okay. So first, like,
I love that you said, like, don't become an entrepreneur just to avoid like bad stuff, like a bad boss or bad hours, right? Because you're right. I love courage. Like I love talking about it. I love talking to guys like you about it, who are stretching, that are pushing. You do something because not only do you see a need for it clearly, but it's a passion. It's your purpose. You're so right. Like it doesn't matter what day of the week it is. Like I'm thinking about this stuff all the time. It's a love story.
Yeah.
And love stories have heart drops. They've got dips. They've got the chase. There's the risk of losing something that you love. And I think when you actually are courageous enough to chase a love story, there's hard conversations that have to happen. You mentioned this already, like love stories, partnerships are not always love stories. You're not just picking the ideas. You said you're picking the partners. And I always say that, change is hard, but the hardships that come from not changing are harder. And if you pick the wrong partner, I mean, have you picked the wrong partner before? I don't know if this is too much, if I'm going down a bad
No. I mean, I have the people who I have worked with have all been very, very talented people, which is great. And some of the things that I think can be challenging, and I'm thinking not only of the companies I've started, but also companies I've invested in. So some of the things that can be challenging sometimes are, you'll see situations where the partners are not aligned on what their goal is for the company. And I think that's one of the biggest, stumbling blocks, where one person wants to sell, the other person doesn't want to sell. One person wants to grow it to be a huge thing and take all this investment. The other person says, I never want to take any investment. That sounds terrible. And those can be just cataclysmic for the company when you don't agree on that. Or, sometimes you have different work ethics. So, one person wants to work really, really, really hard, and the other person's sort of chilling and maybe working 20, 25 hours a week. And so you have one person who's doing 80 hours and one person who's doing 25 hours. And they're like, this whole 50-50 thing doesn't seem totally fair, guys. So, those are really problematic. I've seen companies where a partner has like a meltdown and doesn't show up or do anything. And I mean, those can be extremely challenging and, horribly stressful. And so that's a really, really, really important piece to get right.
Look, as we're two entrepreneurs here, right? So is there, maybe this is an idea. Is there like a pre-qual matchmaking partner site? Does that exist?
Yeah, they do have those actually. They're like these sort of like ripoffs of kind of dating sites, basically, where, it's funny. I mean, I've hired a lot of people who are my friends, and some of them have worked out and some of them have not worked out. And it is hard to do that when you have a friendship that gets really, really tested. And so there's a lot to be said for you're just kind of partnering with somebody new who you don't know necessarily from the beginning, and you kind of get to know each other through work. My current kind of longtime co-founder and partner, Slav Kulik, who has been with me at my last companies, I met him through work, and it was actually great. He was not my kind of buddy before, although he is now. And, that's often a really, really nice way to bring folks together.
Can you think of a time though, where like you had to have an absurdly hard conversation with the partner? And this is a bit of a choose your own adventure. So you can decide, like, was there a time when you just like, I didn't have it and I should have had it? Or was there a time where you're like, you know what, I had to have it and thank God I had it? Or is there a story that stands out for you?
Yeah, I mean, I want to be respectful to the other folks who I've worked with, and I do respect and love all those guys and gals, but yes, you have these really difficult situations sometimes. I mean, I had a situation where, a very, very close friend of mine who I had brought in at a senior role in one of my startups, I had to lay off. That was horrible. He was a great, great friend of mine, still is a great, great friend of mine. And it was difficult for our friendship to overcome that. I had another situation where, one of our partners wanted to go in a very, very different direction than the other partners wanted to go in. And also horrible, really, really difficult discussions to have, especially when you really care about the other person and you're kind of looking out for your needs and you're looking out for their feelings and their needs, and you're trying to be empathetic and understand, and they're trying to do the same. That's very, very tough. That's very tough. So, whether those people are your friends beforehand or not your friends beforehand, it's the hardest part of the job is dealing with those things. And you don't want to disappoint people, but, ultimately, when you're starting a company and you're the leader of the company or one of the leaders, your responsibility is not only to one individual, but to the whole group. And you know that, look, you got a whole lot of different people who are all looking to you to be the parent and fix everything and make sure you're steering the ship through the asteroid field. And you sometimes have to, make hard decisions in that process. So
is there for anyone that's listening and is on the precipice of going after their dream, going after their love story, what's the one question you would have them vet for another partner? If you had to pick just one, which would you go with?
I would probably say something like, pretend we're 10 years in the future. Tell me the story of what happened with our company.
I like it.
Because if you do that, you're getting the kind of, news story or the book, the epilogue, kind of at the end that says, here's what happened. And I think that allows you to really get a sense of, all right, what is this person's vision? What do they want? Where do they want to take it? What does success look like to them?
All right, let's, I don't know if you knew this was coming. Let's flip the question on you. So, here you are, you're the chairman of Plan A Technologies. 10 years from now, what's that story look like? And if you can, give a little color, like how many employees, you guys are global, where is everybody? Just give the high level so people understand where we're at.
Yeah. So I did not expect that. I should have expected that. But so our company is a young company. Plan A is just a couple years old now. And, we've been growing very, very quickly. The company does software development for a lot of both giant Fortune 500 company brands, along with tiny little 2-person startups who are building their first proof of concept. And when it comes to software, we do anything and everything related to it. The team programs in 19 different programming languages now. We've got folks in 14 different countries, several hundred people all over the world, and in South America and Central America, in Europe, in Africa, in Australia, and continuing to expand. So it's a pretty exciting time at the company, and it's growing a lot. And my last two companies, our goal was very straightforward in that we had product companies, and I knew from the beginning that I wanted to build this new product up. Everything I do is in the technology world. So, we had two technology products. The first was a mobile product with a company called MacroView Labs. The second was a kind of gamification product that we had with a company called Offercraft that we sold. And so with each of those, I knew we're going to build this sucker up. We're going to get a lot of happy clients. It's going to be a great time. And then we're going to sell it in a few years to a bigger group that can take it even further. And that was the goal from the beginning. When we brought folks in, that's what we told everybody. And we said, what we're going to do here is you're going to make a much lower salary than you should, but you're going to get some equity. And here's what we're going to do. And hopefully at the end of the day, this works out for everybody. With Plan A, it's different. With Plan A, we did not build a product company. We built a company that is more services focused, where we're doing development work. And the goal is not to just kind of build it up and sell it like we did before. The goal is to build something really big. And that comes from wanting to, create a company that's much larger than the ones that we've done before. The companies we did before, worth millions of dollars. It was great. Everybody was happy, but those are fast. We built those in the first one in 2 years and the first one in 3 years before we sold it. Plan A is now larger than both of my last two companies were combined. And it's growing much, much faster. And so our goal with it is just to, see what we can do and, try to make something really big.
Yeah. I'm curious how, when you say, let's try to make something really big, and permission granted now to go back to more theoretical than like practical business. Yeah. So like, for any entrepreneur that's listening, like, I think the just start part kind of makes sense. You got to leap, but then how does one go from start to big? Like, how does somebody do that? And maybe I'll throw a little wrench in here. How does somebody do that without giving away control? Like how do you hold on to, right? And it's not control for the sake of control. It's like control for the purposes of like fulfilling the vision that you see and not getting derailed on that vision.
Yeah. Yeah. I have a few different kinds of answers to give there to your question. I think when scaling a company up, there are different ways to do it. And, there's the more conservative way and then there's the more aggressive way. I think, what the conventional wisdom would say in general is, especially in the technology world that I'm in, you want to go out, you want to get some kind of proof of concept going, show a little bit of traction, raise a little bit of money from friends and family if you can, to be very scrappy. Then you do a kind of a bigger seed round or kind of A round and really start to get more traction with it. Then you continue to raise money and continue to grow. And by raising money and bringing in all these investors, they'll give you lots of wonderful advice. They'll help you go to great places. You'll have to give up a lot of equity and a lot of control, but that's okay because you're going to have a smaller piece of a much, much bigger pie. And certainly that has worked for many, many, many people, and God bless them. That's awesome. Good for them. I wish I had met those investors. The experience I had was very different. My first company, I completely bootstrapped. So I didn't take any outside money at all. The second company, we took a little bit of money and we had some wonderful investors. We also had some not so wonderful investors. And it was so painful dealing with those people who are the not so wonderful ones. Can
you list their names, please?
and I've seen so many other startups just get completely wrecked from having bad investors. And again, I know that all of the VCs and angel investors out there, I know that there are many wonderful groups out there and they're terrific. I did pitches to a lot of groups, several of whom wanted to invest, but there were always these terrible clauses like, they have the right to block me from selling my company when I want to, they have the right to do, get these, extra 2x, 3x liquidation preferences on things and all sorts of terms that just sounded terrible to me. And, I've just found, and I know, again, it goes against all of the conventional wisdom. And maybe it's just because I'm a control freak. I don't know. But I have found that it is so much more fun and so much more pleasant if you don't have to deal with outside investors who are making you do a whole bunch of exercises that are, crazy hypotheticals that are insane time wasters. And, I'm never going to try to raise money again. I just found it to be really, really unpleasant. Both the process of raising money and the process of dealing with the existing investors that I got. So, in general, I would say when scaling up a company, do everything you can to not take outside money. Obviously, many different businesses require a lot of outside money, and that's okay. You have to do that, especially for businesses that require a lot of real estate or equipment or gigantic marketing dollars, because it's going to be B2C. Totally get it. And that's a great industry, and I'm sure other people are much better at meeting the right investors than I have been. But, when I'm advising my friends and we're just kind of, chatting around dinner or something like that, I'm like, look, don't raise any money. Try to do this on your own as long as possible, and try not to bring in those outside investors. Because then it's also like, I talk to a lot of people who are thinking about what they want to earn and what they want to make at the end of a transaction. If you get an investor who says, look, I need to get, 10x whatever I'm putting into this, then they're going to say, hey, I'm just going to grow this and put so much pressure on you to grow at whatever cost, because that's how their whole business model is, and then you get an offer. I had a great friend. He got an offer to buy his company for $35 million. His investors were all like, no way, you can't sell it. That's awful. You can't do it. And so he was like, well, I really think I need to take this, but he was blocked. He couldn't sell it on his own without getting their permission. And the whole company ended up, several years later, just completely falling apart, and he got nothing. And he's like, I can't believe I did that. Whereas, I have other friends who sold their company for $10 million or $15 million. And they're like, oh my God, this is a life-changing amount of money for us. We didn't have to split it with anybody else. I really caution folks when trying to think about how to take money, and scaling up. There's a lot of ways to do things very cheaply and to use the money from operations to keep scaling. You go more slowly than you would, but again, just personally for me, it's been a much more fun journey doing it that way.
This might sound like the inner mom in me, or when I say that, I almost mean my own. I hear my mom's voice when I say it. It's a loving. Like you've taken some serious risks. Like, are you proud of yourself? Like, do you even have time to stop and think about what you've accomplished? Is that a weird question? I'm curious, what's your take on
that? No, I mean, it's a very, you're right. It's a very mom question. I think if my mom were here, she'd be like, well, I'm very proud of him. It's funny. I mean, I think that I feel a lot of relief, actually. Like, if I'm just sort of being honest, I feel a lot of relief. Again, those years in my 20s were really rough, because I was like, this sucks. I mean, I remember in my high school graduating class, we had I don't remember, 650 kids or something like that. And I was voted most likely to succeed and most respected and all these things. And you kind of get that into your head, and then I was lucky enough to go to Princeton, and the school where you have all these crazy overachievers and everything. And I was like, oh my gosh, how am I going to, I got to do well. And then you start sort of trying out all these jobs, and you're like, no, this sucks. And this sucks. And oh God, this sucks too. And oh my gosh, and so, there was definitely a time there in my life where, just before I kind of got started on the entrepreneurial road, I was like, something's going wrong here. This is not cool. What do I do? What am I doing? And I'm really happy that I found this, because it really, it scratches the creative itch that I have to be creative and come up with cool new stuff. I'm a real people person. I love talking to people all the time. And so I enjoy getting a chance to interact with everybody, a typical day for me, I spend morning till evening every single day having a million different business calls and conversations. And so I love getting a chance to do that. I really enjoy sort of the I enjoy games a lot. I love playing games, and running a business in many ways feels almost like playing one of those video games that's like a, create your own world type of thing, moving your soldiers to one part of the board or the other part of the board and trying to like figure out how to protect the core. And like, it's just, there's the real, it becomes really, really, really fun. And so, it's funny now, I don't kind of look at my career and think like, oh, I'm so proud of myself. I did it. I more just feel the sense of like, okay, all right, I didn't screw up. All right, good. I'm happy. Things are good. Life is good. So, I guess that's kind of how I look at it now.
Isn't it funny though, that still your brain, right? This inner dialogue, this self-talk is like telling you, hey, you're not supposed to mess up. You went to Princeton. Hey, you're not supposed to mess up. You've got the superlative from 599 other kids who don't know what they're going to do, by the way, right? How they're going to figure it out to be the most successful. And I think a lot of this is that, like, how do we, and by the way, I'm the first to acknowledge and admit, like, that same voice that sometimes I detest is the voice I bless, because it's giving me the confidence to keep going, like, and not fail. It's like, I'm going to show you, doubting little inner voice, that I
100%.
I could do this, and that I can move my army men or women over the board as you see fit. So I imagine like one of the more fun parts of this. And do you feel like, I always say this, like, it's like Maslow, and you don't get to pass go until certain parts, right? And once you get to pass go, then like, okay, we've started. Now we go from start to big. Okay. And then Maslow, it's like we pass go, and now we go from big to bigger, or big to sale, or, or scale to sale. That's a good title of a book. And so let's talk about selling, because that's got to be the fun part, where you've passed go on the metaphorical board game, and you put yourself in a position where that little voice is like, this is my time. Like, this is it. I think it's time to start thinking about it. And your partners agree and whatnot. So like, what's that criteria look like for you on selling a business?
I think from me, again, it started with thinking about from the beginning. All right, what's the end goal? Where do I want to be here? I realized I didn't fully answer your question earlier when you were asking about scaling up and running the company. And I think that scale to sale concept, both are actually tied together. You want to make sure that you're not in a perfect world. You're not selling the company when the company's struggling in any way. You want to be selling the company when it's on an upswing and when things are going well, if you can. Scaling a startup from just idea to, well-functioning machine is hard. There's never enough resources. There's never enough time. There's never enough people. Nobody's ever heard of you before. And you're talking to all these places who are constantly like, and you are, okay, well, maybe we'll meet with you later. Thanks for reaching out, honey. And then, hanging up on you. And so, something kind of cool starts to happen when people start to kind of come back like, oh yeah, I've heard of you guys. Oh yeah, I saw you at that trade show. Oh, that's really neat. And, you start to get this feeling that like, oh, okay, wow, we're really cooking here. This is, we're hitting it on all cylinders. And, then you have, as you're, there are a million of these kind of branches, but you constantly have these like forks in the road where you can say things like, all right, now our company has proven our concept. We've achieved X, Y, and Z. Do we keep growing or do we sell? Let's say you keep growing. All right. So now you keep growing. Now you've scaled up. You've invested more. Now you get to the next level and you're like, wow, now we've got our first 50 customers or first 200 customers or whatever it is. We've got a couple $1,000,000 in the bank. Things are really moving. Do we want to think about selling now and getting out, or do we want to take a lot of the profits that we've had, reinvest everything into now getting a second level of infrastructure? So we don't just want, the C-level folks doing the sales and running everything and doing ops and doing everything. Now we're going to invest in more VP level people and do that. And, you've got these like decision points to make in the life of a company where you're like, once again, do we punch out now or do we keep getting bigger? And, that's the first thing to think about. When you're at one of those many, many, many forks in the road, it's like, all right, which path do we want to take here? And this becomes a very tough challenge for a lot of founders and a lot of folks at the early stages, because they're kind of like, gee, I only have so many hours in the day. A due diligence process, most of them don't realize how horribly intensive that is. I mean, that takes like hundreds of hours and it takes all your focus. And even if you have organized everything in a pristine way, when company says that they're interested in buying you, and you got to start loading everything up into the data room, and they're going to have a million questions, and they're going to want to see everything reformatted in different ways. And, now you're going to have to hire a lawyer and pay the lawyer tens of thousands of dollars, and your accounting firm tens of thousands of dollars. And there's just crazy amounts of time and money, and all the time that you're spending with this would-be acquirer is time you can't spend running your business and getting more deals and operating everything. And so it's a really difficult decision to go on. And then another thing a lot of founders don't realize is many times the very first offer you get for the company, A, isn't the best, and B, doesn't work out. And so a company will say like, all right, look, we're interested in buying you. We'd like to enter into discussions. They'll often give you some kind of letter of intent. There's like a no shop period of, 60 days or whatever it is. They want to have a conversation. And now you're like, oh, shoot, there's a no shop. Now I can't ask other people. I can't try to bid this out. And you try to go and approach you can work with an investment bank if you're a big enough company, but a lot of companies aren't big enough to get the attention of an investment bank. So they're trying to figure it all out on their own. And then they have no idea what to pay their advisors who are helping them with it, or if they even should get advisors. There are a lot of decisions to make on this. With my first company that I sold, I had no idea what I was doing. I mean, I literally went to, bookstores and got all these books on how to sell your company. And people are like, well, I'm going to need this from you. I'm going to need that from you. And I'd be like, okay. And like clandestinely trying to like look up what the hell they were talking about so that I could sound smart on a phone call. Like, oh, so that's what you need. Give me just 1 second. And I would quickly look in the index to try to figure out what the heck they were requesting. And so, you can do it that way, and you can have a, good experience, but you're not going to optimize and maximize the amount of money that you could sell the company for. I know I'm kind of giving you a very broad answer and touching on a lot of different topics here, but I think in deciding whether or not to sell, you really want to think a lot about, what are the future prospects, short-term and long-term for the company, and really imagine both paths. Like, here's the path of if I sell, am I happy with the amount of money I could get? Am I happy moving on to something new in my life? Versus if I want to keep growing. We at Plan A, we get people who ask us, with relative frequency, would you like to sell? Are you interested in selling right now? And because we see a very, very bright future for us, the answer so far has been no, we want to keep growing. We are not interested in that just yet. But those are really important discussions, I think, to continue to have. So,
all right, Aron, this has been awesome. And I feel like anytime I'm learning myself, I'm like, I want to take notes on that. And I feel like the best way to wrap this up is imagine the listeners have all sort of opened up just one Post-it note. And it's a small little Post-it note that they can keep next to their laptop or on their laptop. And there's only 3 spots on the Post-it note for things for them to remember as they go on their entrepreneurial journey. And maybe you can give me one on how to start, one on how to scale, and one on how to sell, on the sale. And if you were going to give me like those 3 points, and by the way, this is, You can tell me to scrock off, and you can give me 3 different points for my Post-it note. But what should I write down?
For me, I make a lot of the decisions in my life by thinking a lot about what my 95-year-old self would tell me to do. And in general, when I am unsure of the right way to go with something, I think a lot about, all right, I'm trying to imagine now my super wrinkled old version of me sitting on a rocking chair with a blanket over my knees, giving me some advice.
Where are you living?
Yeah. Hopefully I'm living in Hawaii.
Okay. So you're in Hawaii.
Yes. So I'm in Hawaii watching all the surfers and doing, even though I can probably barely walk by that time. But, for me, really, I think a lot about the avoidance of regret. This kind of overriding theme of, hey, man, you only live once, and whatever that means for you. So if it's, you only live once, so sell this thing now, pocket the money that you can get from it and do the other things that you want to do. Cool. Or you only live once, you want to try to build something really big and giant and cool, go do that right now. Or you only live once, don't do a job that you don't enjoy doing, do something that you're going to feel more passionate about in life. I talk to so many people who are unhappy every single week. We all do, right? In their jobs. So many of our friends who are complaining and complaining and complaining. I used to feel this sense of every Sunday night, I'd be feeling depressed. I'd be like, oh my God, I can't believe I got to go to work tomorrow. This sucks. Now, Sunday night, I get super amped and have for years because I can't wait to get started on work the next day, which is an amazing, amazing feeling that I feel incredibly grateful for every day. And so I think my advice for all of those, for starting, scaling, and selling is really think about that concept. Is, hey, you only live once, do this thing, do it the way that you want to do it. Don't waste time. I
didn't see you as a YOLO guy. I'm not going to lie. I love where we landed. Aron Ezra, keep doing what you're doing. I know I'm going to come see you. You're based in Vegas, but you got employees all over the place. Plan A Technologies. Check them out, everybody. Thanks for joining, Aron.
Thanks so much for having me.